was a lot of experimentation with fighting games in the 1980s, more than most people realize. Two people squaring off and punching each other until one falls over was such an obviously great idea for a video game that pretty much everybody took a stab at it. Data East Karate Champ might not look like Street Fighter II, but if you pull apart the game systems here, it was a pretty major step on that evolutionary road. Unfortunately, this disk system version was extremely late. The original arcade game, which was called Karate Do in Japan, was released in 1984. It was the first video game based on karate matches, and it might best be known for its puzzling interface which used two joysticks to determine what move you performed. Later in 1984, Data East released a revised version that allowed two players to fight. And that game has an extremely important place in video game history, because when Capcom sued Data East for making a fighting game in the 90s, Data East pointed to it as proof that Capcom didn't make the fighting game genre up all on their own. Karate Champ was ported to Nintendo's consoles in 1986, and then it wasn't released in Japan. I don't know why that happened. 1986 was peak Famicom boom years, and I think this is a game that would have done very well on the Famicom, but for whatever reason, Data East decided only Americans would want to play fighting games. Well, now it's 1988, and Nintendo is calling anybody who will still answer the phone for them, begging for FDS games. Karate Champ was small enough to fit on a disc, so why not release it? Karate Champ is very much an early arcade game. You progress through stages, but the only thing that changes on each stage is the background. If you're playing single player, then you're the guy in white, and your goal is to defeat the guy in red. If you manage to land a blow, then you'll either be awarded a point or a half point, depending on how effective the judge feels that it was. First player to 2 points wins the round, and then every match is fought best of 3. Karate Champ has a pretty significant barrier of entry that can prevent people who are just picking it up and trying it out from making any real progress. The challenge here is that the control scheme is incredibly complicated. Pressing a button in a direction will perform a move. So there's 5 different moves if you press A, because not pushing in a direction is a direction in itself. 5 different moves if you press B, and 5 different moves if you press A and B simultaneously. Some of these moves are straightforward enough. You punch, you kick. But others move you around. You do a spin kick that leaves you facing backwards. Or you jump to a certain point. As a rule of thumb, the actions that use the B button usually go behind you, but that's not true of all of them. And movement in Karate Champ isn't instantaneous. Everything you do has a certain rhythm and reach to it. Getting the feel for that is how you make progress in the game. You can go pretty far with just basic punches and kicks, as long as you can get the feel for the exact moment when you should do it. The way that moves interact and positioning matters makes Karate Champ feel like a technical fighter from a more recent time. There's move priorities. You've got frames of action to take into account. Obviously, this is a primitive form of that, but it still feels like a step on that technical road. If you're ever defeated in a match in Karate Champ, it's game over instantly. No continues. But every opponent's the same, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. There are 10 backgrounds that you're progressing through, and after you reach the end of those, you go back to the start. There are bonus stages after you defeat every opponent. Here you have to smash bottles that are getting thrown at you, but you have to do it in just the right way, and I've always had trouble getting a feel for this one. The timing and move selection is just kind of weird. This version of Karate Champ is super obscure in Japan. Even if it wasn't on the disk system, it probably didn't help that this port came in 1988. Karate Do's heyday was 4 years ago, and as we've seen, video game tech progressed fast in the 1980s. I know Karate Champ can be really difficult to get into these days. You just about have to play with a manual in front of you. That said, it is a very historically significant game. This is where people were figuring out some of those key aspects of fighting games. And even if the structure doesn't resemble what fighting games become, The underlying mechanisms are all there. I doubt many people would want to sit down and become a karate champ master, but it is well worth taking a look at.